Hello chess friends and welcome to the Chess channel and welcome back to the FIDE Grand Prix in 2022. So we're following now a beautiful game that was played in the group stage between the chess prodigy Vincent Keymer from Germany and the top grandmaster Levon Aronian. So this game, in my opinion, was the best game from the round 5. In one particular moment you basically don't know which king is more endangered. Is it Levon Aronian's king or is it Vincent Keymer's king, because they played really a sharp line of the Ragozin variation of the Queen's Gambit declined, which is really one of the sharpest openings that you can play in the Queen's Gambit decline. So as I said, it's really something worth to see. Let's check out now what happened. As I said, in my opinion, it was simply the best game from the round 5. So here d4 played by Vincent Keymer. We have knight to f6 by Levon. We have c4, we have e6, and after knight to f3 we have the anti-Nimzo system. We don't want to play knight to c3 because then you're vulnerable to some attacks with the move bishop to b4. So here Levon Aronian transposes into the Queen's Gambit declined. After move knight to c3 we have reached the 3 knights variation, and now comes the so-called Ragozin variation with the move bishop to b4. And you can play now many things. I like to play this exchange variation, c takes d5, e takes d5, and then I like to pin also here the knight against the queen. So this would be now this exchange variation. It's a simplification line in the center of the board. I think we have released at least a little bit the pressure in the center of the board, but there is also this very cool elegant variation of the Ragozin variation that you can play with the move queen to a4. And this is a forced line because the only way to protect your bishop is to play the move knight to c6, and it's actually a good line in my opinion. If you don't like to play against the Ragozin, you can use this idea. As I said, I played different lines. After move knight to c6 we can notice that black cannot play anymore this aggressive move c5, because let's go back. For instance, if white doesn't play the move queen to a4, then in some occasions you could face this particular line. You could face some ideas like queen to c5, then queen to a5, knight to e4, and similar stuff. So that's why this would be sort of aggressive methods. With the move queen to a5 you're basically not allowing black to do this aggressive line. So here after move queen to a4, as I said, knight to c6, and now comes a very calm move e3. The problem I think of this queen to a4 line is that you cannot play any more bishop to g5, because I think you could risk really some wild tactics, because now d takes c4 seems pretty forcing now, and after something like e3, bishop to d7, you have to protect your pawn on d4, and now you see there are some nasty discovery attack possibilities against the queen. And the problem now is that the queen doesn't have good squares. You're pretty much forced to play queen to c2, but now with b5 I think that black can simplify the game and protect also the c4 pawn. So that's the actual main goal of black, for instance, in this line. Then the main line would be something like a3, bishop to c3, b takes c3, and here with the move a6 black could maybe rely here on this space advantage and also on this pawn majority on the queen side. So as I said, it's something really worth the study. If you want to play the move queen to a4, then you have to play like Vincent Keymer did here, the move e3. You cannot play anymore, I think, the move bishop to g5. You can play it, but it's in my opinion a risky line. So here castling was played by Levon Aronian. We have queen to c2, we have queen to e7. There is this is sort of a theoretical novelty already by Levon Aronian. There is only one game in the database in this particular line where queen to e7 was played. You could also try rook to e8, because now the main goal of blacks is here to take d takes c4 and then to push the pawn on e5, because the king is a little bit endangered. You need at least 2 more tempi in order to secure the king. You see, you play one move with the bishop, and then you also need another tempo to secure the king. But this move rook to e8 is, I think, slightly more risky, because let's see, you can play bishop to d2 here from white's perspective, then after d takes c4, bishop to c4. Now this e5 idea is actually not working because of the move queen to b3, and you're a little bit vulnerable here around the square f7. So that's why this line queen to e7 is allowing here black to stay with the rook protection around the square f7, and now still this e5 idea was working, and that's exactly what Levon Aronian is trying to do now. in the Ragozin system here. So here after move queen to e7, we have bishop to d2. Now again the same idea, d takes c4. Okay, we have bishop to c4, and now e5. We want to simply open the e file, and the cool part is, as we said, queen to b3 is not working. Everything is pretty much protected this around that square. So here Vincent Keymer plays a normal move, d5, advancing the pawn. We have queen to c5, beautiful counter attack here by Levon Aronian, and we have now knight to e4. You don't want to take, of course, here the pawn on the knight on c6, because you get queen to c4, and okay, you could maybe take out here also the pawn on b7. But now after move bishop to b7, okay, let's see also this one, knight to e5, you're attacking the queen. But now with queen to h4, you can be really the judge of this position. In my opinion, white will face many tactical problems. Knight to f3 is not working. I think black will simply take, and there's not a good way anymore to castle on the king side, to secure the king by castling on the king side. And also castling queen side in this particular scenario would be also very risky, because already the b file is open. And I think with the bishop pair, with this active queen, with some rook activities on the b file, maybe even on the d file, as I said, white could face many tactical and positional problems in the continuation of the game. So that's why let's go back after move e5. As we said here, d5, queen to c5, knight to e4 was played. So here Vincent Keymer didn't want to take out the knight on c6. Levon Aronian simply takes knight to e4. We have queen to e4, and now finally here we have knight to e7. And now comes one of the critical moments of this game. Here Vincent Keymer got a little bit greedy. You cannot take, of course, the pawn here on e5, because you lose here the bishop, but you could take it with the knight, and that's exactly what Vincent Keymer did. He took with the knight, but actually a better idea is simply to kingside castling. And then for something like bishop to f5, maybe Vincent was a little bit scared about this move. You have a beautiful counter attack. You simply take bishop to b4, queen to b4, and now you can take out the pawn. Everything is pretty much protected, because if you want to, for instance, take out the bishop, we can also take out the knight. And this is the tactic I think that he missed, because he could have gone into a slightly favorable middle game stage, where the game is more and more simplified, and he could have maybe an extra pawn in the continuation. You could also take off this one, but here then you lose also the pawn on c7. So that's why this was sort of a line maybe to simplify the game and play a good game. So but he took here on e5, and here it gives now Levon Aronian the opportunity to continue the pressure. Here Levon Aronian simply plays bishop to f5. You had your chance to castle, you had your chance to secure the king. Now you're playing simply on the defensive side. So here bishop to f5, queen to f4, and now bishop to d2, king to d2, and you see now white cannot castle anymore. Okay, white is up a pawn, but that's not enough. I think with this endangered king on d2, here Levon Aronian has, I think, a comfortable game. But now comes another critical moment of the game. Here Levon Aronian doesn't react correctly. He plays a forced move, queen to b4. It seems like a tempting move, but actually here a better idea is simply to keep your pieces active. We want to stay with our bishop here on f5. We want to stay with our knight here because the knight is attacking. So the only good way to protect everything is to play a calm move, and it would be a perfect move, which unfortunately for Levon he missed. Here instead of this move queen to b4, you can also here play the move g6, and now the threat is of course knight takes d5, because this move couldn't work earlier, because after knight to d5 you lose the bishop on f5, but this g6 is supporting the bishop, and now knight to d5, rook to d8 is simply opening the d file. The only way to protect everything is to move queen to d4, but this is not good, because you get simply queen takes d4, e takes d4, and now with the rook from a to d8 or rook from f to d8, the problem is, I think, that here we have two isolated pawns. This pawn will be taken for sure, and then in the continuation of the game you're continuing the middle game stage with an isolated d pawn, and that's not good. I think that black can simply continue the pressure and will, I think, win the game very easily in this particular scenario. So as I said, here Levon Aronian played queen to b4 instead of this move g6, allows now Vincent Keymer to get out of this d file mess. The d file mess you have seen could have been really wild idea. So that's why king to c1 perfectly fine. So we have queen to c5. Levon gets back, but he's trying now to play a very aggressive move b5 because now we have a beautiful pin on the c file. But here Vincent Keymer of course counterattacks. First he plays g4. Here a beautiful move by Levon Aronian, g5. G5 is very tempting because if you play queen to g5, this is losing immediately, I think, here for white, because we can cover here with bishop to g6, and even if you get back with the queen, then b5 is simply winning the game. You can maybe try this tactic, this fork with on d7, but actually with queen to c4, queen takes b takes c4, okay, you can take out the rook, king takes the rook, and now after something like rook to d1, bishop to d3 is an opportunity to maybe support this pawn on c4. But I like even this idea, bishop to e4, and this pawn is simply hanging. So it's, I think, good game here for black with the two minor pieces against one rook, especially when we think about this rook. This rook will need extra time to get back into the game. Meanwhile, black's rook is much faster on the attack. So that's why here after move g5, queen to g5 is not so good. Here Vincent Keymer found a beautiful counterattack. He gets out of this c file mess and attacks now the queen. We have b4, we have now queen to b4, and now queen to d4 here by Vincent Keymer. So knight to g6, here Levon Aronian is searching for a simplified line. We have bishop to b3, and now queen to a3, a check, king to d2. We have now c5. You don't want to, of course, take d takes c6 because first of all, you're opening simply too much the d file, and now with rook from f to d8, you can maybe cover yourself with knight to d7, but now bishop to d7, c takes d7, and now with queen to e7, I think again that black is a beautiful game. This pawn will be taken for sure. The knight comes into the game, knight to e5, knight to f3 could happen. I think in this particular scenario the knight would be much better, especially again because of this endangered king position on d2. So that's why after move c5, Vincent Keymer realized that he cannot open, of course, the d file, plays a calm move, queen to c3, knight to e5. We have here g takes f5, and now rook from f to e8. Here Levon Aronian is finally supporting the knight, because the knight is very important here on in the center of the board, because the main target, I think, when we watch now white position, is to play something like rook to g1, and then also maybe even deliver checkmate on g7. But this move here, rook to e8, is allowing here also a little bit is allowing this knight to stay a little bit longer in the center of the board, because after rook to g1 there is maybe this fork idea of knight to f3. So that was now pretty much a really wild game, and basically from this point on both of them, I think, played even the top engine moves, because first of all, what Vincent Keymer did, he found this beautiful move, rook from h to g1. This is the correct move, really wild stuff, because what you could do is, of course, this fork, but actually this fork wouldn't be good, because here after king to e2, okay, we take here, rook takes g1. Now you're vulnerable here around the square g5. You have to play something like, I don't know, h6, but now you get h4. And what you do here, maybe you can try to trade off the queens, but it doesn't matter. White can actually go into this endgame, because after queen to b4, c takes b4, h takes g5, h takes g5, rook to g5, we have a check. And here I don't know, maybe after king to f8 we can play e4, then f4, e5. I think this 4 versus 1 situation, pardon me, e4 is not a possibility immediately, but here maybe first f3, then e4, but with this 4 versus 1 pawn situation, I think that white is, I think, a cool game. The rook is very active. Even f6, maybe here's a possibility, rook to g7, then with d6 we could further attack this pawn on f7. So I think this is a good game for white. So Vincent Keymer played here brilliant move, rook to g1, allowing here Levon Aronian to do this fork. Levon Aronian didn't fall for this. He played now b5, simply expanding on the queen side. He's noticing, of course, that he has to make something here, because the knight has to stay as a good defensive piece, because as we said, the main target is simply the weak g7 square. So here rook to g5, really wild stuff. Levon allows here this rook move. We have king to h6, h8, you see here it seems so that the knight is really trapped here, because the potential f4 move could actually win the game, but actually f4 in this particular position is not working, because you get b4, you get a counter attack, and if you play something like queen to c1 to trade off some pieces, then you get again this fork. Knight to f3 is a little bit different now, because you can maybe play king to e2, we can take, knight takes g5, you takes, and now after f takes g5, now rook to e5 is attacking both of the pawns, and now I think it's a little bit different, because here what we can also notice in this particular line is that black is a passer, and it's a different story. As I said, in my opinion, this is a comfortable game now for black. So you see how wild this game became. Rook to g5, knight to f3, as I said, always was present, but here in this continuation after king to h8, here Vincent Keymer played really a bad move, bishop to d1. The only good move here for white is actually again really wild move, rook to g1 again, because for instance, if you try something like b4, let's see b4, if you try maybe to attack the queen, there is now really wild tactical shot, rook to g8, you take, but now you see the rook gets deflected from defense of the knight, and you can cover, of course, only with the rook first, of course, with the pawn takes, and now it's a checkmate. So here after rook from a to g1, there is only one way to stop this progress. You can play f6, attacking the rook, but now with rook to g3, again, I think white is a comfortable game. In the near future, of course, f4 tactical shot could work, but now I think with this battery on the g file, but this is a position that I think bothers now black in the continuation of the game. So here, as we said, this was now the only move that Vincent Keymer could have played to have a comfortable game, but unfortunately for him, he played now the move bishop to d1, allows now here Levon Aronian to get back into the game with the move queen to a6, because he can now control some dark squares. He can also control his pawn when he plays now the move f6. He can control, of course, this very important dark squares in front of this king. So here bishop to e2 played by Vincent Keymer, and now rook from a to d8 attacking simply the weakness, and here we have e4 supporting simply this pawn. Very important move, because here actually the king is not so endangered anymore, because now the d file is simply cemented. Now comes again one of the critical moments of the game. Here Levon Aronian plays, I think it's a mistake, queen to a4. Here he has to play, I think, queen to h6. He has to get with the queen back into the defense. It's sometimes really hard to see the best defensive moves in the continuation of the game. After queen to h6, you can maybe try this battery that we said that was good for Vincent Keymer, but now again with f6, I think that black has solved now many problems, because the knight is very powerful here. You see that this is now also counterattacking here. You have to play something like f4, and from this point on the game is really tactical. But in order to prevent these ideas here, after move queen to a4, okay, Levon Aronian had a clear idea. He wanted to attack this pawn on e4, but there is, I think, an easy way to protect this pawn, f3. But the problem, I think, about this move f3, and probably Vincent Keymer calculated that it could be maybe a risky line. He probably calculated this tactical shot, rook to d5. After e takes d5, queen to f4 could happen. Now you have to move the king, maybe the rook could be hanging, and now okay, you can take out bishop to b5. But actually black doesn't have so much. I think black doesn't have clear checks, so even if you try maybe one check, then we play simply king to c2, and everything is pretty much protected. The rook is at least not hanging on a1. Probably this was sort of a line that scared a little bit here Vincent Keymer, and he plays now the decisive mistake here after move queen to a4. As I said, Levon Aronian should have played simply queen to h6, but now here rook to h5, and finally this pawn is hanging. It's now a different story. Vincent Keymer is now completely lost, because now the d5 is hanging, the f5 is weak, f2 is weak, h2 is weak. This is a weakness. All of these pawns are isolated pawns, they're pawn islands, and it's it's simply game over. Really, I'm not sure what to say, but he could have really stayed in this position. He played really great game, Vincent Keymer. Unfortunately, he makes now this brutal mistake. Rook to g1, rook to d5 simply takes, and queen to f4. We have rook to d4. Now it's very easy for Levon Aronian to find the best next moves. Bishop to b5, rook to b4, simply grabs a piece. Here rook to king to a1. Here Levon Aronian takes, and after rook to e1 here, after move f6, the knight is cemented. You cannot kick away anymore this knight, and in this position Vincent Keymer resigned. So what to say, really brutal, brilliant game with all of the tactical elements that we love to see. Really king in the center position, deflection, decoys, double attacks, pawn breakthrough ideas, rook sacrifices in the center of the board. Really brutal game. This game could have gone also in a different direction. Unfortunately for Vincent Keymer, he didn't see the best next moves. We have seen also a couple of inaccurate moves by Levon Aronian. So as I said, it was a double-edged, beautiful tactical game in which Levon Aronian took the best. And okay, I hope that you enjoyed the game. I really enjoyed it a lot. It means now that Levon Aronian has a comfortable half of the point lead in front of Andrei Sipenko in their group. Still, Andrei Sipenko can make something happen if he wins the game, if he wins the next game. So still many things can happen in this tournament, so be prepared. This will be again some really wild stuff. So okay, I hope that you enjoyed the game. As I said, if you want to see more games from this event, check out my coverage so far, and if you like this content, don't forget to subscribe to my channel. See you soon with some more videos, and chess is the best, of course.